everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Lab Talks, the non-fungible podcast. As you know, I am the usual host. I've had a bit of a hiatus, but I am back now, and I'm very happy to say I've been joined by Alex Payne from Vice. Alex, I don't know if you want to just briefly introduce yourself, your role at Vice, and then we can get into the meat of it.
Sure thing. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm the VP of Ad Operations at Vice Media Group. I've actually been a part of the company for almost 11 years now. Time spent between 3 different offices, London, Amsterdam, and a short stint in Milan. Always in ad operations, but the department has evolved over my years at the company to the point where we now oversee all direct and indirect monetization of our O&O platforms, the distribution of branded content across our social platforms. I oversee an ad studio, a team of ad designers that are tasked with building engaging and rich creatives for our advertisers. And then there's also the programmatic business as well that obviously we began working on together at your time with Sharethrough.
Yeah, we were just saying before the call, we've been known each other now for like 8 or 9 years, and yeah, having been at Vice for 11 years, very, very impressive, I have to say. And it sounds like you do wear a lot of hats in your kind of day job, day to day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the joy of the department. Really, it was an opportunity to begin with, really, to wear many hats. I remember first starting in the London office as a campaign manager, but what that involved was activating campaigns like trafficking. I was media planning. I was managing relationships of publishers across our advice network, involved in reporting. It was very multifaceted. So it's been true to that throughout, really, and has allowed me to kind of expose myself to multiple areas of the media business, and it's remained interesting throughout.
And I think it would be good just to, I guess, talk briefly, and you mentioned it at the beginning, but you kind of have your direct business and then the indirect business. Would you mind going into like what the direct business entails and then what the indirect business involves?
Yeah, so the direct business is, I suppose, quite traditional in that we have local sales teams in key markets, pointed at clients, both new and old, really, direct as well as agency. And the way that our US team is set up is very much on a kind of pod basis around categories of advertiser. Okay. And we tend to kind of try and mimic that. You'll have salespeople that have their specialities in certain areas. We're quite blessed in the UK with our ID sales team that is obviously very appropriate for fashion clients. And then similarly on the R29 side, the different type of client base there to perhaps the one that Vice has grown up with. But between the 3, we tend to cover the full spectrum, really, and would like to apply ourselves to every type of advertiser out there. It's similar with the indirect business. I mean, we pursue programmatic deals via the same salespeople. We don't necessarily have like a dedicated programmatic or a dedicated direct team. They all are tasked with selling both, really. And the synergy between our 2 offerings when it comes to deals, particularly programmatic guaranteed deals, is quite helpful to them because we can activate what they sell directly. We can do so, indirectly or via a programmatic direct deal. On the other hand, with our kind of more pure indirect business, like our open market business, that's maintained by myself and my technical solutions team. Consisting of Jan in Germany and Callum in Amsterdam, where we basically stand up, maintain, and optimize our programmatic tech stack. So from relationship management with our SSPs through to technical implementation of the tech itself, reviewing the numbers, setting budgets, recognizing revenue. It's really contained within my team. And then we act as consultants, obviously, to the commercial team on what they might do programmatically. So we're always on hand and always there to kind of steer them through client conversations.
I think it's always really interesting to talk to someone like yourself when you think about the monetization of which you can describe as just selling ads across your portfolio of sites, right? But like when you really get into the nitty gritty of it, it is a very complex and comprehensive sales strategy to allow you to access what is quite fragmented pots of investments that you see from advertisers, from agencies, from brands direct. So yeah, it's always very interesting to kind of hear from yourself when you talk through how difficult that is. I always think it's difficult running an exchange, but I think it's much harder to work for a publisher because the pots of money that you go after are always so varied. There's always different rules around how you can engage with those pots of money and so on and so forth. So I guess one of the reasons that we're talking is because we've worked for a long time, but now in kind of this guise is that we're looking to start integrating some of your websites to help your monetization on the indirect side of things, the kind of the programmatic stack as you described. In your experience with kind of building that stack out, where have you kind of had the most successes, and then equally like where have been the pain points for kind of getting an effective monetization strategy?
Sure, yeah. So I think in the early days, and Vice was quite late to the scene in terms of establishing its own programmatic marketplace. We wanted to protect our direct business perhaps a little bit longer than we should have done. We were quite naive, really, thinking that it was one budget that we were ultimately going after, when we knew, and we know now, that it was two different budgets, right? Direct programmatic, and we wanted both. We wanted to engage with those same brands, those same advertisers in both ways, and we had the tools and the solutions to do so. So we stood things up, around 2017. We partnered with Index Exchange on their header bidder solution, and we really wanted to set things up quickly. So we went with Index, given that it was a more remote integration that they could optimize for us through a header script. And we wanted to be sure that we were partnering with the key players in the marketplace, really, to catch up and to make sure those kind of key pipes were laid down. So the familiar names really in the marketplace back then we partnered with. And we looked to complement that really with our approach was looking for uniqueness within demand. So I think if you'd asked me that question back in 2017, what was unique about a partner beyond the core group that we signed up to as default, then I would have said international demand. So we had a very kind of broad global presence in terms of our traffic and our sales teams, that we wanted to complement their own sales with the indirect piece, right, to fill in the inventory. So we looked to any partner. I mean, we felt like in terms of US, UK, we were well covered. But markets, perhaps across other markets across Northern Europe, maybe LATAM, maybe APAC, we looked for suitors in those areas. And this is true now as well, format-wise, we wanted to align as closely as possible the indirect sale, the indirect delivery of an ad, and the experience for our users with what they were experiencing directly and only up to that point. So great example would be native, right? We spoke about our partnership with ShareThrough previously. We were very quick to partner with ShareThrough because of the native demand that they're able to provide, which mimicked and complemented what we were already selling directly, and having that ad experience be uniform really through direct and indirect. So that is true today. I think we've experimented more now than we would have done then. We've lent into the formats offered by the partners more so than we did before, just to make sure that the mix of monetization is as strong as it can be. And I think from a geographical point of view, we've really kind of refocused on the core markets again, right? To make sure that we are the best setup for the US, we are the best setup for the UK, because that's where we're pushing forward in terms of our commercial focus.
I think that's always one of the sectors of the industry where I thought there was the most innovation was through ad formats. And I mean, when I first started out, I used to work for a company called Mozu, and we used to sell interstitials on mobile web,
I
effectively,
remember that.
which, yeah, which were a little bit nasty, to be honest with you. I think probably the click-through rate could have been attributed to people with big thumbs rather than engaging ads. But I think throughout that kind of, it must have been what, from like 2012 to kind of now, there was some really amazing innovation. You had like Outstream became a huge thing, like Teads
Yeah,
ultimately getting acquired by Telefonica.
as a good example of a format and a partner that we could align both directly and indirectly with the same
Yeah.
experience and high value demand. So yeah, we've been with them since we began operating in this space, really.
And they are a fantastic business still, you know, like you don't get to the size and scale that they do without doing something really well. And kind of when I took a brief hiatus into influencer marketing, which I wasn't a huge fan of, which kind of led Chorley and I to kind of founding Alkimi. And what I was quite still was really, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the open RTB specification that we're using has existed largely since kind of 2016, 2017 in the 2.6 iteration. So when we wanted to come to market, we wanted to be able to offer the same formats that you've discussed there, which again is what OpenRTB is great for. It's very, very standardized in terms of how those ad units are delivered, how people bid on those ad units, and how an ad server ultimately delivers them onto page. But what we got really excited about was the potential to kind of really upgrade the underlying infrastructure and provide more value for publishers like yourselves. You know, like we take 3% of the bid, we pass on as much revenue as possible to you because you guys create the content at the end of the day. You know, like you're the reason for an ad to exist in the first place. And I think sometimes it can be a little bit unfair with kind of publishers eating last, as it were.
Yeah, it doesn't help support a quality marketplace ultimately. You know, it's very, very short-sighted to perhaps kind of feel that, you know, maximizing the all kind of party share of the piece at the detriment of the publisher is in the interest of the industry, because it isn't. Without the content and without it being a quality content experience, the industry will suffer.
Absolutely right. And it's like, that is also like, ads fund the open internet, right? Like that's kind of how your journalists get paid, your development teams get paid, is through the revenue that's generated by ads. So in having that kind of extracted from the middle, there is, and you've seen this across the board really, but sometimes like people can rush to get an article out. You know, I always think about like the 7 celebrities that stepped over a puddle this week. Like, who really cares about that? You want more of the quality journalism, reporting on the things that matter, that's accessible to as many people as possible. And there was kind of a period of time where paywalls and subscriptions became very much in vogue, but because there was so much content around, people were just like, oh, I just get it in my Facebook feed. It's aggregated from the Times, let's say, and pushed there anyway. So I think really the way that we view the world is that we should just be trying to put as much money back into publishers like Vice's pockets so you can continue writing the amazing content you do. I mean, particularly Vice is a multimedia publisher. You know, you have a TV channel, you've got your in-depth journalism, just general journalism, and then the amazing branded content that you do. It's like a multifaceted business, which you need to be able to create content for.
Throughout, despite obviously the market challenges and the commercial pressures on the business, it's still quality first, you know. And it's important as much in like our editorial output as the way I see it within what we do in our ad business. You know, it has to remain quality.
Yeah, exactly. And so to kind of talk about Web3. I mean, everyone's talking about Web3 all the time now. How are Vice thinking about it? Do you have any strategies? If you can't say, please don't get yourself in trouble. But yeah, do you have conversations about Web3 in the office?
I don't necessarily. No, I think it's a very keen topic for our agency, Virtue, to engage clients on. So I know we've done some work with some brands there. So yeah, not really yet. I think if you'd asked our product team, perhaps they are considering, you know, ways in which we could present ourselves in that environment. but I think it's remained more of a kind of client, more of a virtue client kind of setup than anything else.
That makes sense. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think one of the ways that we think about kind of Web3 Rails, and this, we're probably a little bit away before this is actually kind of realized, but because with Web3 infrastructure, you kind of in effect increase the thickness of the protocol layer, if you will. So like the application layer is liking, tweeting, interacting with the front end, and the protocol layer really was limited to kind of connecting the databases where the content's held, so you can access the content anywhere. I think what blockchains and Web3 allow for is the kind of transfer of value, proof of ownership on the underlying infrastructure. So the way that we're kind of thinking about that is that there might be a future where people have a browsing wallet that they use. So rather than kind of having a cookie notice that appears when you log into a page, you connect your browsing wallet. That wallet will have some information around you anyway. So whether it's you've got some crypto in there, or whether you have certain NFTs from like a Nike or a Starbucks or Adidas, kind of these big brands that are now moving into that Web3 space, the Alkimi infrastructure could feasibly surface those bits of information. Like, hey, there's a Nike NFT in this wallet. Is that then interesting for Nike to retarget that user? Is it interesting for Adidas to try and show them a pair of trainers instead? And there has been a long spoken about cookie apocalypse that apparently now is slated for June 2024. And I think the timing is going to end up being quite nice with the adoption of Web3 and blockchain to allowing wallets online to become a ready-made replacement almost for when cookies do finally disappear, which I'm sure you can talk to this better than I can, but cookies are essential for the targeting of ad campaigns, even knowing when an ad was served. So it is like a bit of an existential crisis that is facing the industry. And I don't know, that's probably the first time you've heard that, Alex, but I don't know if you have any like thoughts on like the cookie apocalypse, or and then kind of any other replacements outside of blockchain actually that you think might come in and help solve for cookies disappearing at any point in the future, if that does indeed happen.
Yeah, and I like the idea of almost like an extension really on browser that is a user's profile, that if anything is just going to save them time and stress and perhaps even just nuisance, right? In having to kind of agree to all of these cookie modals and privacy modes that appear, and no one they don't read them, and they're going to click yes if they can, you know, clearly identify which option is yes, because it's not always clear.
That's very true. Yeah,
they don't click yes, it's probably not because they meant to click no, right?
Yeah,
and that's more complication added to the matter. I just to speak quickly about the way that we approached our setup there. Is we wanted to kind of simplify it as best possible. You know, I think the language that can be included in those modals is very overbearing to the average internet user. It's overbearing to me. So, you know, I think it's as simple as possible. While we're forced to use that, just have ask a very simple question up front. Allow, obviously, I think you have to, for legal reasons, allow the user to access more information and more control, but don't put all those controls right in front of a user's face. It's like asking them to fill out a complicated questionnaire when walking into a store. You wouldn't do that. You know, you'd ask somebody a simple yes and no question if you had to for legal reasons. But even that as a barrier to entry is not fun. You know, you want to be able to kind of just to walk in at your own leisure and be comfortable and take a look around without having any kind of barrier to entry, right? That's not great. So yeah, with you on that. And I think, you know, I think the way in which we can get around, we'll need to get around kind of what's going to happen with cookies, and is already happening, right, to some extent browser-wise, is just re-identification, really. I think identification is important for personal choice, right, and relevance and engagement and all these things that have held up the advertising industry as being so strong and of high value and effectiveness. There will need to be some form of re-identification. Contextual is an area that we've specialized in for many years. We lent into it quite early in in contrast to what we did with programmatic, we were a very early adopter of a brand safety approach for obvious reasons, really, for who we are as, or who we were as a device brand, really. So contextual in terms of like what we consider to be a live audience is still very much live in terms of an option going forward, right? So there's that. There's user reg, right? So you spoke a little bit about the subscription model that's established itself across the industry. We don't have one at large at Vice. We have a model on the Waypoint side of things, Waypoint Plus, which has been doing well for us. And we are looking to add a news-based subscription offering too.
Okay, nice.
Not one that would stand in the way of any content, but one that would unlock additional features and benefits for a user, which is the model we adopted and did Waypoint. So there's that reg. There's perhaps modeling off the back of reg. We've partnered with Piano actually as not only our DMP of choice, but also our analytics platform of choice as well. So we've lent into that solution. We feel good about them being future-proof in terms of a data management platform. And yeah, just it's about re-identifying, or in some cases, just identifying our audience. Because one thing that I always questioned about the use of advertising data of users is its authenticity. I can find myself in terms of data segments being, every age range, every single gender identity, right? Interest in every single sport, which just isn't true. It just isn't true. And perhaps in the kind of quest for more scale, true identity was lost, and we need to establish that again.
I agree, because I think like advertising for me is like little and often works really well. Like I actually found, it was funny, I was on the tube the other day and I saw an advert for Ingham's, which is like a skiing holiday provider. And I was due to go skiing before Christmas. It got cancelled because it snowed and the entire UK just grinds to a complete halt. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll have a look to see if you can get any like last minute deals with a little bit of snow that's left. And I was like, where am I going to look? And I was like, oh shit, I actually remember seeing that ad, Ingham's. So I used it, and that was just like me passing it on the tube. And I was like, it's such a shame that Ingham's are never going to know that I saw their ad on the tube.
Right.
And then Googled it. It's like the attribution becomes wrong. And I think being able to be shown the right ad at the right time quite often works. You're like, oh, where did I want to do that. What have I seen? Oh, here's a website. It's showing me an ad for what I want. And that is when it can really help. I think, as you say, when you get shown the wrong ads at the wrong time, it can make the whole experience feel quite alien. And sometimes, like, particularly now in the era of Zoom calls, if I often show websites and then it shows the trainers that I was looking at in a basket last night on ASOS or whatever it was, and I always get ratted out, I always say, by my cookies on my browser for stuff that I've been Googling in my own time. And
right. Yeah.
There's no other way to really target ads, though, is that without doing that with a cookie at the moment. I think
it's
so important.
And I think there's also, I mean, you're speaking about outdoor there, and I think outdoor is a kind of a method of advertising. I kind of envy it at times, right? Because it's viewable, it's sort of assumed viewable, right? Because it has the opportunity to be seen, right? And in a way, I wish that the digital industry had adopted that as a way to measure the viewability of an ad. Like, is it in a well-lit, kind of well-trodden place, right? Does it have good traffic, right? And is it not is it front and center, like, is it going to be seen? And we assume that with outdoor, it kind of is, right? Because it's not like up a dark alley somewhere where it's not seen and no one goes, right? It's just an opportunity to be seen. So I'm envious of that. And also just the fact that also, like, look at something as accepted and admired really as just as like Times Square or Piccadilly Circus advertising experience. It's cool. You're not really looking at relevance there. You're just creating a cool advertising experience. In a way, that's what I want to do on Vice. And so
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do unbiased. I've always created a cool advertising experience and put the kind of relevancy and hyper targeting to one side,
Mhm.
So maybe that is how we go. We just create quality advertising experiences to complement what we hope is quality journalism.
Absolutely right. I think I will still buy magazines, because like when you kind of get that full page glossy ad in a particular magazine, it's like there has been a lot of thought and consideration into taking that photo, editing that photo, some messaging behind where that photo is set, what the image is actually portraying. And again, it's like you assume a Londoner will walk through Piccadilly, right? And it's like a certain type of person will buy a certain type of magazine. You never need to prove it. And I think that's where it's kind of the joys, the blessing and the curse digital advertising is that you can measure everything to the nth degree. You can have like dwell time, time in view, clicks, quartile completion, so on and so forth. And what is that actually really telling you about whether someone interacted with an ad or not? It's just like being in the right place, getting that editorial halo from being in a good magazine with a high quality ad creative is the way to go.
It's under extreme magnifying glass, right? Where if you have such a thing to hand, then you'd probably enjoy it more,
Yeah.
Like I'm literally at this moment, I'm getting a radiator fitted in my kitchen, right? And I know that
Yeah.
painted, that they're putting it on, and I know they're going to mark it. And I know that if I got up to that and I had a magnifying glass, I'd see marks. I'm just not going to bother. I'm not going to look at it that closely.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Enjoy their work.
Yeah, just you take it for the warmth rather than the view of it.
Yeah, the warmth. Let's just take the advertising for the warmth that it gives us.
Yeah,
not the
exactly right. You can tell we can tell we both work in advertising, can't you? So yeah, I think, how do you kind of view? You kind of briefly touched upon the cookie side of things, but the next sort of, I guess, 1 to 2 to 3 years coming up in advertising, like where would you love it to go? I'm going to explain that a little bit, but where do you think it's going to end up? Do you think it's going to be more open marketplace? Do you think it's going to be more direct deals? So where's your head at?
I mean, from the perspective of Vice Media Group, really, I'd like to see us continue what we're doing today, really, in having that value, that strength to stand up and keep successful a direct business focused on branded content. So allowing us to work with brands, obviously, to produce content that is meaningful and effective and can help create a quality experience, not just on our owned and operated channels, but across obviously the social channels that we turn to as well. I'd like that to continue. I think we'd agree that we would collectively across the business. Really, we have seek to kind of address economies of scale issue with activating across social by actually coming up with quite a new format last year that we called Canvas, which was basically taking made assets that the client provided for like co-partnership, co-content partnership, really, and framing it quite literally with one of our brands. So we bring the content to our audience under our handle in partnership with obviously the brand itself, right? So just a border, right? It really comes down to just having a border and a couple of slides that are templated. Works very well with like trailer content, like movie trailer content, and also maybe gallery images, that we can just take, having the ad studio just create a or frame within these slides, really, and these units, and then scale across social, obviously, because we can find such scale while keeping that context as VMG, so that's something that we've kind of done to work with obviously the greater cost with activating across social versus O&O and the scale considerations of what we have on O&O versus social, obviously. So
yeah,
the way that we've kind of, and also mirrored what we've been doing publishing wise in looking social first, right? But looking ahead, I think the website experience is something that we're certainly looking at to reinvent, really. I think websites just look too much like one another these days.
Yeah,
you know,
I'd agree with that. Yeah,
and there's probably too many ads as well.
yeah,
you know, and there's too much kind of short-sightedness in terms of, okay, let's make sure we're monetized well, right, in that moment. So that kind of that longer user journey isn't perhaps considered as much as I'd like it to be. So what we're looking at doing is creating more of a an opportunity for the content discovery across our platforms. So taking obviously what's great about social in terms of like social stories, content, feeds, relevance, quality, perhaps even some user generated content as well is something that we look at. How we can build that into a new website experience that I think needs to be mobile first. And what I would argue for is we actually revert back to the days of a separate site for desktop and mobile and abandon the whole idea of it being responsive anymore. Because I think they just need to be built very differently now. Like the experience doesn't need to mirror one another across those two platforms. Like mobile, we're so used to how we consume content on social that we should look to mirror that in a way that's going to keep the user engaged and live within that experience, right? And not go back to the social platform, right? Because we've probably got them from there, but yeah, we kind of keep them within the Vice experience and learning more about the stories that we're telling and have told, because there's such a library there, video particularly, and resurfacing that is a value, industry, like market wise, as much as obviously for the company, right? To have that looked at again and resurfaced. So there's that. I think that the way that the type of content needs to be presented is relevant too. So we have Vice News, right? I think completely different experience for news, I think is relevant there. Probably more relevant for desktop than it is for mobile. So again, like that kind of like device consideration around website experiences, we should be having that really. We should be creating different experiences for both. I think that's probably where we're headed across all of the brands.
It's really interesting. It's interesting you say that there should be fewer ads online, and I think that is kind of one of the secondary effects that we hope Alkimi can help publishers achieve. It's like, I think the first step for us is to finalize the integration. We get inside your pre-bid wrapper and help monetize the inventory that you have. But then my hope is that because we're giving you so much more of that bid back, you would have fewer ads being shown, a more considered ad being shown. And then I really look forward to, as our partnership grows, like how can we help you on like I can't call it boring, but it's the really interesting blockchain underlying infrastructure. Like how do we potentially tie it in with the paywalls that you have and the registrations of users, and using a blockchain to ensure that is true and that you're not being spoofed. There's that kind of layer of authenticity coming from an immutable ledger of data that allows you to prove that someone is who they say they are, and you can kind of show them the right ad accordingly or not, depending on, is this someone that only spends 5 seconds a week on our sites? Do we want to remove the ad experience, get them to enjoy Vice content more so, have them become a fan, and then start to respectfully show them some ad units that complement the experience rather than kind of push people away straight away when you kind of
I like that. I like that because not only are you personalizing the experience for them, right, but you're perhaps helping you're helping alleviate ad block as an issue for the industry, right? Because you're allowing them to decide, okay, on this publisher I'm good with ads, but perhaps on a different publisher I'm not. And it's been a concern of ours that perhaps an ad experience on a different publisher is costing us that, literally, right? It's costing us that user on our own site, despite our best efforts and intentions and and goodwill, right, in respect of the user and our content.
Totally.
So actual choices around advertising. I mean, obviously we've had ad choices in the market for quite some time, but that's only really informed one player. If it informed every player, then I think the user would be far more appreciative and warmed by advertising than they are.
I agree, because it's like we've spoken in the office, like if you rewarded people, and I kind of stole this idea from Duolingo, you know, like you're learning a language, you get a streak in their app where you've revisited day after day after day. I think that if you could reward someone that came back to buy a property on a Monday, then a Tuesday and a Wednesday and a Thursday and a Friday, and then they get a roundup of a newsletter of all the content that was perhaps behind the paywall or whatever it may be, like there's a really neat way with a blockchain in particular to prove that that's taken place and then reward people for doing so. Like, I think the issue that the problems that we found ourselves had is that there's just too much content online right now. Like, you can get your content basically wherever you want to. A lot of that loyalty is lost to particular publications or whatever it may be, because some people have shown people too many ads, and people just in general are like, hey, ads, they're ridiculous, ruin my favorite website. But like the old value exchange was, okay, I'm going to produce great content, we have to show ads on that content to pay for it in the future. Advertisers want to access certain audiences, and there's kind of that like intended value exchange on the internet. We could talk about it, and it's like that has really been lost because there's loads of ad units, people block ads, probably just have to show more ads to those users that haven't blocked it to try and get that money to then get more ads. But you know what I mean? It just like becomes this really bad self-perpetuating spiral, which it just is. It nets out to things like the GDPR, right, where all of a sudden regulators came in who may or may not have had an in-depth understanding of the marketplace, and like with very broad strokes came and made some big changes that impacted a lot of businesses. I remember kind of speaking personally when I was at Share3, we had something crazy like a 25 times reduction in the revenue that we saw in like the week after GDPR was rolled out, because we simply couldn't even tell if an impression had been shown to someone. Like, we blanket, you cannot target anyone without their consent whatsoever. And it had a big impact on the business. And I think that really that's favored the big social platforms because they've got very deep pockets and also an enormous audience where even if some people don't want to see an ad, they're going to come there anyway because people absolutely love social media. So I think, there's a lot of room to improve where we're at. And I think that Vice have always done a good job. I mean, we talked briefly at the beginning, but when we worked together, like, we've had a lot of conversations around branded content and sponsored content and kind of keeping that ad experience very good for an individual. And I think it'll be great now with my Alkimi hat on if we can help do that, albeit slightly different route, but just providing you guys with a bit more revenue that allows you to be more considered about ad choices that you're making, because you're getting more of that money from the advertiser, whereas sometimes you can lose it.
Yeah, fully agree. And I think it would be it would also be right to mention, obviously, the authentication of that ad impression as well is something a bit like GDPR that the industry is continue to struggle with, right? So still like huge value in trusting that the impression, is it's come from the source that it's supposed to have done, that the revenue is shared the way it's supposed to have been, and that you can actually trace that. I mean, that it's only going to help the industry from both, publisher and advertiser side. Just trust, particularly programmatic, right? Just trust it. And I guess that's outdoor, right? You can trust outdoor. Walk outside and see the thing,
Exactly that.
Not as easy to do. You have to sort of trust the numbers that you're seeing and scrutinize the numbers that you're seeing, and then through scrutiny become like you find faults, right? Because you're looking for it.
That's actually I had never even thought about it like that way. Like, there is really no issue aside, I guess, from the specific advertisers, whether they are following ad guidelines or not, but like, you can't spoof an ad in Piccadilly Circus. It either is or it isn't, and then that is the answer to the numbers. Can you imagine? Although, like, maybe with these new 3D ads that are going on, but Yeah,
Yeah,
I've never thought about it that way.
There'll probably be a pair of like specs you can wear, and okay, just wear these and walk out, and you can actually see it in the location that you're planning to post. It would be cool.
It always whenever I think about that, it always reminds me of Minority Report in that scene where he's like walking through the street and he's trying not to make eye contact with the ad, so he gets
I mean,
alerts the authorities.
When was that film out? Because I'm sure it was before I got into advertising, and I thought I want to work in advertising. Having seen that particular scene, I was like, this is cool.
Yeah, it must be like the early 2000s that film came out, I'm sure.
And what's crazy about those films is they always predict the year, right? And the year is probably more or less the year we're in today, you know.
Yeah,
that's what makes them fun.
Oh, it makes me feel old.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, I think thank you for joining the podcast. This has been great. I've had a really good conversation. We had an old tradition, and I think you're probably a good candidate for this, but what has been your favorite ever ad that you've seen anywhere, really?
I might just think about that one for a second.
So my favorite one recently, and this is because I forget which one it is, but I was actually speaking to someone on the way into the office. It was someone that was taking the piss out of crypto. It was like, I want to buy this glass of milk, and it's like, well, we only take cryptos. I've got a fiver. And I just thought that was kind of very much encapsulating, I think, how a lot of people view blockchain, but also part of me didn't like the easy jab they were making, because I think outside of certainly some bad players that exist in the market, the underlying technology is going to be great. It's going to solve a lot of the stuff I think we were talking about. And generally make a lot of people's lives a bit easier. Not quite there yet, but we're getting there.
Let me think. Okay, I've got a good one. It's from like early days of me working in at Vice. So basically, these are the days of like leaderboards and MPUs being all the rage. And we actually had an advertiser, and I want to say, I can't remember who it was, but I want to say they did this intentionally. They put together probably the worst looking like leaderboard I'd seen. It was very kind of clip arty, you know. But I think they did it intentionally. And like the click-through rate on that was insane, you know, because I think because of the uniqueness of it, right? Interestingly, it was unique because it looked quite bad, you know. But I think now what's kind of quite important to consider in that is I think the uniqueness now would be in how good something looks. Get someone's attention that way. This thing obviously got people's attention because it was just such a bad ad. It was like, you know, the logo was far bigger than it needed to be. Like the image that was being used as like the primary image was probably like blurry, you know, intentionally made bad, but incredible click-through rate. Like we're talking like 10%.
Really? Wow,
that was my favorite ad because it just broke the norm, you know. The norm in terms of high quality.
I think probably puts us in a very nice place to wrap that up. So Alex, thank you very much for your time. I know you're very busy. I really appreciate you jumping on to shoot the breeze with me. And I think that we'll call it a day there. Thank you very much for your time, mate.
Me. We'll speak very soon.
Awesome. Cheers, Alex.
Cheers. Thank you. Goodbye.